Hi, this is Denise from Denise in Wonderland, a magical journey of faith through Christ. Today, we will sink deeper into God's Word and His truth. We have to chase the presence of God, and we can do so through His Word. Let's get started. Job 8. Then Bildad the Shuhite replied, "How long will you say such things? Your words are a blustering wind. Does God pervert justice? Does the Almighty pervert what is right? When your children sinned against him, he gave them over to the penalty of their sin. But if you will seek God earnestly and plead with the Almighty, if you are pure and upright, even now he will rouse himself on your behalf and restore you to your prosperous state. Your beginnings will seem humble. So prosperous will your future be. Ask the former generation and find out what their ancestors learned. For we were born only yesterday and know nothing, and our days on earth are but a shadow. Will they not instruct you and tell you? Will they not bring forth words from their understanding? Can papyrus grow tall where there is no marsh? Can reeds thrive without water? While still growing and uncut, they wither more quickly than grass. Such is the destiny of all who forget God. So perishes the hope of the godless. What they trust in is fragile. What they rely on is a spider's web. They lean on the web, but it gives way. They cling to it, but it does not hold. They are like a well-watered plant in the sunshine, spreading its shoots over the garden. It entwines its roots around a pile of rocks and looks for a place among the stones. But when it is torn from its spot, that place disowns it and says, "I never saw you." Surely its life withers away, and from the soil other plants grow. Surely God does not reject one who is blameless, or strengthen the hands of evildoers. He will yet fill your mouth with laughter, and your lips with shouts of joy. Your enemies will be clothed in shame, and the tents of the wicked will be no more. Job 9. Then Job replied, "Indeed, I know that this is true, but how can mere mortals prove their innocence before God? Though they wished to dispute with him, they could not answer him one time out of 1,000. His wisdom is profound, his power is vast. Who has resisted him and come out unscathed? Who moves mountains without their knowing it, and overturns them in his anger? He shakes the earth from its place and makes its pillars tremble. He speaks to the sun and it does not shine. He seals off the light of the stars. He alone stretches out the heavens and treads on the waves of the sea. He is the maker of the Bear and Orion, the Pleiades and the constellations of the south. He performs wonders that cannot be fathomed, miracles that cannot be counted. When he passes me, I cannot see him. When he goes by, I cannot perceive him. If he snatches away, who can stop him? Who can say to him, 'What are you doing?' God does not restrain his anger. Even the cohorts of Rahab cowered at his feet. How then can I dispute with him? How can I find words to argue with him? Though I were innocent, I could not answer him. I could only plead with my judge for mercy. Even if I summoned him and he responded, I do not believe he would give me a hearing. He would crush me with a storm and multiply my wounds for no reason. He would not let me catch my breath, but would overwhelm me with misery. If it is a matter of strength, he is mighty. And if it is a matter of justice, who can challenge him? Even if I were innocent, my mouth would condemn me. If I were blameless, it would pronounce me guilty. Although I am blameless, I have no concern for myself. I despise my own life. It is all the same. That is why I say, he destroys both the blameless and the wicked. When a scourge brings sudden death, he mocks the despair of the innocent. When a land falls into the hands of the wicked, he blindfolds his judges. If it is not he, then who is it? My days are swifter than a runner. They fly away without a glimpse of joy. They skim past like boats of papyrus, like eagles swooping down on their prey. If I say I will forget my complaint, I will change my expression and smile, I still dread all my sufferings, for I know you will not hold me innocent. Since I am already found guilty, why should I struggle in vain? Even if I washed myself with soap and my hands with cleansing powder, you would plunge me into a slime pit, so that even my clothes would detest me. Here he is not a mere mortal like me that I might answer him, that we might confront each other in court. If only there were someone to mediate between us, someone to bring us together, someone to remove God's rod from me so that his terror would frighten me no more. Then I would speak up without fear of him. But as it now stands with me, I cannot. Okay. So again, that was Job 8 through 9. This one will be a little bit shorter today. Um, we've got a new friend. We've got Bildad the Shuhite, who is now trying to share his wisdom with Job. Um, and some of it has overlaps with Eliphaz. And again, like before, a lot of what he says is true, and some of it is again does not apply to Job. So let's dig in. Okay, so verses 3 through 7, we see kind of a discussion about God being just again. We've got in verse 4, where Bildad says, hey, when your children sinned against him, he gave them over to the penalty of sin. So this is a reference to God, to this process where God always rewards some kind of judgment for any type of sinful behavior. Well, not rewards, but, that's the consequence. The only problem with what Bildad is saying is we see him say, when your children, he's not speaking generically, he's talking about Job's children. So he's saying, hey, your children sinned against God, and so God killed them. So he's using the death of Job's children, who, by the way, just died, to prove his point. So this is probably I would say, as I would say, he has very little tact in this. This also is showing that he has no compassion for Job. He just lost his children, and you're going to use the children to say, hey, your kids died because of this. This is not going to help Job. Remember I believe it was in Job, our first chapter, where we hear about how Job was the spiritual leader of the household and how he interceded on his children's behalf. So again, we also see that God temporarily lowered the hedge of protection around Job. So it was not the sin of Job's children that's actually not the reason why they died. So again, Bildad is not informed as far as the situation, and which we could be okay with, but it's also, again, he has no compassion, at least with that statement. And it does make you wonder, well, how does Job feel? Because remember, Job is really in a bad way. Remember when they first arrived, I believe at the end of Job 3, the friends were silent because he just looked like he was in such anguish. So if these are the first things these friends are saying to Job, I'm like, what kind of friends does he have? He needs some new ones. Okay, so now we've got Job verses 5 through 6. We've got Bildad basically tells Job, well, let me read this really quick. It says, if you're upright, pure and upright, even now he will rouse himself on your behalf and restore you to your prosperous state. So he's saying, hey, if you turn it around, Job, and start to seek God, he say God will help you. God will be merciful and he'll turn things around, basically. The only problem I have with this statement is he says, restore you to your prosperous state. Think about what he's saying. Basically, he's saying, hey, if you can avoid your children's fate, basically, of death, and be restored if you seek God. But one of the big issues is that part of Job's pain is because of the things he can never get back. Like, he can't get back the workers that he had, the employees who probably had spent decades with him. Those people are never coming back. The families of those employees are never coming back because they're devastated as well. Not to mention the children. They're never coming back. So even though could restore him, Job's pain is related to what he lost. So I don't know if a promise of being prosperous is something that's going to give him comfort at this point. So, I mean, because Job, frankly, he kind of acknowledges, he understands that God can, make things well for you. So he's not, that's not Job's issue. So I don't know if this is helpful for Job. All right. So verse 7, is your beginnings will seem humble, so prosperous will your future be. Again, talking about future. And again, Bildad is missing that Job's pain does not exist because he has a concern that he'll be blessed again. Remember in Job 7, verse 10, remember he says he will, quote, no more see good. Because remember, he's asking for death. So he is a tormented man. Job is. He's got tormented dreams. He's frankly feeling sorry for himself. Remember, he's got those sores, so there's just no way that this is going to help him. All right, let's go ahead into verse 8. Ask the former generation and find out what their ancestors learned. So Bildad is referencing the ancestors. He's saying, hey, life is short. So what we need to do is look at the knowledge that some of our ancestors gained. And I guess he's saying maybe that'll help him, but I don't think it's human knowledge that will help him, but it is possible that if this is human knowledge about God, maybe that will help him. Then we've got, let's see. And I also want to make a reference to, remember, Job needs some kind of comfort. This is just not comforting. Or Job wants to know what he did. Remember, he mentioned that he's like, hey, friends, hey, I promise I'll be quiet if you just tell me what I did. So that's another thing that Job is asking for. So those are the two things that Job needs a lot, at least that Job indicates. He wants to be comforted because remember, he told the story about the caravan and the brooks of water. And he's saying these friends are these dried up brooks of water that when the going got tough, they were nowhere to be found. And they didn't provide any kind of like relief for him. Okay, verses 11 through 13, we've got this reference about the papyrus and the reeds. It says, can papyrus grow tall where there's no marsh? Can reeds thrive without water? And it says, while still growing and uncut. So if they grow untamed, they will actually wither quickly. And then it says, verse 13, such is the destiny of all who forget God. So perishes the hope of the godless. So this is a metaphor, and he's saying that the destiny of people who forget God is like the papyrus and the reeds that are growing undisciplined, uncut. Because see, papyrus and reeds, they need the marshes, they need the water. That's the environment they grow well in. But if they grow with no kind of intervention, no one goes in and prunes them, then they'll cease to exist. They won't thrive for very long. And so Bildad wants Job to understand that those who forget God, even though you see yourself getting prosperous, at some point God's going to cut you down. Basically, God's going to cut you down, but this is a blessing for God to cut you down because hopefully that will help him. So again, he's kind of reworking that message to Job that, hey, you could be prosperous again. God just had to prune you a little bit and you'll eventually get back to being abundant, having an abundant life again. Then we've got verses 20 through 22, where it says, surely God does not reject one who's blameless or strengthen the hands of the evildoers. He will yet fill your mouth with laughter and your lips with shouts of joy. So he's saying, look, God will not abandon the righteous, and God will eventually deal with the enemies of the righteous as well. And he actually says something very encouraging where he talks about the joy, because he's saying, hey, God will also bring joy to you again, Job. So it's not just about being prosperous. He's like, he's going to bring joy to you. And this is nice that he's encouraging him. because I think he needed to hear that. But how long did it take for us to get to this one line about you'll be joyful again? Not many of the friends have really talked about joy. And that joy, joy is an important concept in the Bible, because joy is something that is internal and it helps your outlook on life. And I wish that the friends had flipped their arguments around and spent more time talking about the joy that God can bring instead of talking about the rules and regulation of how people, if something bad is going on in your life, there's some kind of sin somewhere. Let's deal with it. Again, during grief, joy, I think, is crucial. Um, and I wish that they had did more with that. Okay, so let's now shift to Job 9. But quickly, before we go through that, we see Bildad. We had the Eliphaz, who was a friend who had a lot of wisdom, but we got Bildad as well. And I feel like he's a very one-minded person. I read somewhere that he's like a friend who embraces tradition because, he's talking about the people that came before. But the problem with that is tradition is man made. And I feel like Bildad, as well as Eliphaz, are missing out on another dimension of what it means to have faith in God. And that dimension I'm talking about is the fact that some of us have to go through trials, and also, too, that we do suffer sometimes, and there is not always a source or origin behind it, but there can be a purpose for it. And so, but Bildad and Eliphaz are men. They're not aware of this kind of this, I wouldn't even say new, this way that God deals with people sometimes. So, but again, let's go back to Job 9. All right, so we're going to go to verse 2. Indeed, I know that this is true, but how can mere mortals prove their innocence before God? So Job is at least acknowledging, hey, I believe you guys. Like all the things you're saying, he's like, I'm wearing the t-shirt. I know. I used to wear the t-shirt. I told my kids, I know that God rewards seeking him diligently with blessings. I know that God allows punishment and judgment for those who do wrong, who sin against him. He's like, I know these things. He's like, but you're not understanding me. He's like, how can you prove that you're innocent to God when you know you did no wrong? And that is really why he's starting to also be tormented. He's like, I did good. So if I did good, my gosh, he's like, what's going to happen? Like, what am I going to be facing in the future too? So while Bildad keeps referencing the future, that's not helping Job either, because Job's like, well, if I was innocent before and this happened to me, and you're saying God's going to bring me joy again, is he just going to take it away again? Because we can't even identify what I did. So he's asking a great question. He's like, what can people do to do the right thing? Like I don't even know. Like there's something that I didn't do somewhere. Um, and then verses 2-3 kind of takes on kind of like a legal aspect, like you're taking God to court, so to speak. And if you think about it, this is like almost like he wants to sue God. Like, God, I need you to explain yourself. So Job wants God to be questioned. Again, we had talked earlier in one of the previous chapters about how Job really wants a response from God. So he wants God to be questioned. He wants to challenge or basically dispute him because he feels that God has issued the incorrect punishment or sentence for him. So it's almost like an appeal. Like he feels like God has, in some kind of court of justice, has made a decision and he wants to appeal it. But we're going to see him talk about how God, he's so powerful. He's created everything and he has such authority over earth and over mankind. Like, how can I do it anyways? He's like, I want to do this, but I can't. He's like, God is God. So even during this time of him feeling really upset with God, he still understands and acknowledges the fear of God, the type of authority that God still exudes over God, over the earth. Um, so we see in verse 10, he talks about he performs wonders, referring to God that cannot be fathomed, miracles that cannot be counted. So he's like, God is a God of wonders. He's got in verse 6, he shakes the earth from its place and makes its pillars tremble. So he's talking about a God who is great, who there's nothing he cannot do. And then we've got in verse 12 where he says, if he snatches away, who can stop him? Who can say to him, what are you doing? So again, he's going back to, look, not only can no one dispute God, but how can you stop God when he sets his mind to do something? Um, and that includes if he wants to punish someone who's innocent, like Job. He's like, there's nothing you can do. And it's almost like he's saying, how dare we even ask him anything? So now he's getting to that point. So verse 14, then shortly after that, he's like, hey, how can I dispute God? I'm just a man. Like, I really can't oppose him. Like, he's saying, I want to, I really, really do, but I can't do it. Um, and, and then in verse 15, we've got, though I were innocent, I could not answer him. I could only plead with my judge for mercy. So he's like, even if I am innocent, God, doesn't need to answer. So all I can do is just ask for mercy. Like, I'm going to ask for mercy from the court, basically. But then verse 16, then he says, well, I can't even ask for mercy because I don't even think he's going to listen to me. Because he says, even if I summoned him, God, and God, responded, I do not believe he would give me a hearing. So he's like, all I can do is ask for mercy. And I don't think God's going to listen to me to even give me mercy because God is God. Then we've got verses 17 through 18. He would crush me with a storm and multiply my wounds for no reason. He would not let me catch my breath, but would overwhelm me with misery. Here, Job portrays God as terrifying, and not in a good way, not in the normal fear of God, but in a way, not in the way that should strengthen a relationship between God and man. He portrays God as a God who man should actually keep a distance from. It's like you might want to keep your distance from him because who knows at what point he's just going to punish you, because he's talking about he won't even let me catch my breath. I mean, this is torture. And then there's a part here where he says, multiply my wounds for no reason. So Job is bitter at this point. He's like, I can't believe he did this to me. Like, he's just right at this point, just hurting me. And he's just doing it all this for no reason. But actually Job is incorrect. God did do it for a reason. So let's now go to verse 21. Although I am blameless, I have no concern for myself. I despise my own life. So Job, he doesn't care about preserving his life. He hates it. He hates life. Verse 22 through 23. It is all the same. That is why I say he destroys both the blameless and the wicked. When a scourge brings sudden death, he mocks the despair of the innocent. So now he's accusing God of being a torturer, not just of himself, but now of people in general, both good and evil people. He's saying that even if you're righteous, even if you're innocent, even if you're oppressed, God will torture even you. So he's saying God doesn't even provide mercy. But remember, a few verses above, he said, oh, I'd like to petition the court for mercy. All I can ask for. So we're seeing Job descend almost into a realm of madness now. He's just like going crazy. I mean, he went from saying, oh, God is merciful. Oh, now he's just, and at first he just said, oh, I just want to die. Now he's talking about he's insulting who God's character, because God is merciful, God is just, and God does uplift the oppressed. So we're seeing him now starting to have a very twisted version of God. Yes, he understands what God wants in this world, but he now, the grief is completely distorting his view and perception of God now. Now, I don't even think Job can remember who he believed God was before all of this. And this is what happens when you allow someone's grief to go unchecked. With no, and this person has no rest from it at all. Because remember, he's not even sleeping. So now we've got verses 27 through 29. If I say I will forget my complaint, I will change my expression and smile. I still dread all my sufferings, for I know you will not hold me innocent. Since I am already found guilty, why should I struggle in vain? So here we've got Job saying, I don't want to continue being doomed. Hey, if I'm already struggling right now and I was innocent, why would I want to continue? Like, what's the purpose of me continuing? Because he's basically acknowledging that one of his purposes of living was to be righteous, was to be innocent. But he's like, if this is the reward for that, then why would I want to live anymore? Then we got verse 32. He is not a mere mortal like me that I might answer him, that we might confront each other in court. And this is exactly what he wants. He does want to come. He wants to force God to answer him, but he knows he cannot. And so he's miserable that he cannot get God to explain himself. And he's miserable because I feel like he doesn't believe that he believes that he's always going to continue to experience what he's experiencing now, or if he does begin to thrive again, it's just going to be temporary before this just happens again. So that concludes today, but I just want you to think about how experiences, a lot of us, we may not necessarily be grieving, like we may not have lost someone, but sometimes when we go through experiences of great excruciating pain, whether it's in a relationship, on the job, in the world we live in, it can start to sour your perception of God. You may start to look at him through the lens of the suffering that you see and or experience. So you have to be careful that you try to keep your eyes on God and seek out hopefully some better friends than he has. But you want to be able to continue to find ways to not let yourself just fall apart like this. Because if you stay too long in that deep, dark place, that's all you're going to see is just darkness. And frankly, it makes sense. So just think about that, study this a little bit more. I hope you all have a blessed day. And remember that no matter what you see or experience in this world, God continues to have authority in the earth. God is there for you, and he does have his eyes on you, and he will never leave you. He will never forsake you. As long as you accepted his son, Jesus Christ, as his Lord, as your Lord and Savior, Jesus will make sure that he has created a newer covenant between us and God. He cannot abandon us. He cannot. God will not act contrary to his word ever. And I want you to stand firm in that, because the world, as we see with these friends, even if they're well-meaning, and sometimes they're not, even if sometimes they're well-meaning, sometimes they're not. Either way, men are men. And men do not possess the divine revelation that comes from God necessarily. There are some that do. But ultimately, you always want to be the one who seeks God. Let Him breathe revelation into your life about what is happening in your life or happening in the lives of someone you care about who's suffering, or what's happening in the world. Let God direct you. Let God lead you. Let Him comfort you. That is the only way you can survive life in general. As you know, the world is only going to get progressively worse. And there will be times where we will think, God, the wicked seems like they're winning, and I feel like I'm being punished even though I'm trying to be innocent. Understand that God, that your words do not fall on deaf ears. And your Father in heaven is watching you, and He will uplift you. And at the end of the day, that is what matters the most, to know that He will not abandon you and that He can bring you joy. Look up all the scriptures. Look at Philippians. Think about, and I will give that to you as an assignment. I want you to go in the Bible and find a few references to joy in both the Old Testament and the New Testament. Dwell on those things. Dwell on those scriptures about joy, about how God brings joy to your life, because joy does not have to come when things are going well. So I want you to live with the joy of God today. So have a good one.